This is Fundamentals Test 4, and this wasn't a very difficult test, but you might notice that as the fundamental tests starting to move ahead, they get a little harder, you know. And basically in fundamentals, what we do is we go all the way from the front of the car to the back. And the guy that writes in this textbook, if you look at his name on there, is a guy that named Jim Haldeman. And I was doing the up there at KC Vision, and he went walking by when I was waiting for some other instructors to go to a school on scope or whatever. And so I get training up there every year. He went walking by, and they said, and I said, hey, Jim. He goes, hey, man. And he says, I read all your stuff in Motor Age. And I said, hey, thanks, I appreciate that. And when he kept on walking, one of the other guys said, that was Jim Halderman. He writes all of our textbooks. And I said, yeah, I know he writes mine too. But anyway, he's a nice guy, and he knows he's real knowledgeable. He's got a lot of years in the field. And so you're going to learn a lot looking at his pictures and reading his book and everything. But anyway, what type of socket should be used with an air impact wrench? Now, what's the problem with using a chrome socket with an impact wrench? It can shatter. Now, usually they won't, but they can. Tell you something else that goes wrong with these chrome sockets. Have you ever seen a chrome socket where the chrome starts to peel off the socket down there around the tip? And if you've got little bits of chrome peeling off that socket, and you happen to have that socket in your hand when you pull the trigger, it makes. Have you ever had that happen to you? I mean, it makes little cuts on you. I hate that, you know. Our technician A says impact sockets have thicker walls than conventional sockets, and technician B says impact sockets have a black oxide finish. One of the things he's not mentioning here, and that is supposed to be C, both A and B, but the impact sockets are made of malleable steel, which means they can take a beating they're not as brittle. That's another thing. So two technicians are discussing the use of a typical bench pedestal mounted grinder. Technician A says a wire brush wheel can be used to clean threads. Is he right? You ever clean threads with one of those, with a wire brush wheel? Yeah, you can do that. That's really the best way to clean threads in, unless you're going to run a thread chaser up them. I'd rather do it on a wire wheel because it's quicker, and I do it all the time. Technician B says the grinding stone can be used to clean threads. No, I don't think so. However, if the tip end of that screw, of your thread, like you got a very specialty bolt, and you got your threads going along here, and it come on the end, it tapers off a little bit. And then you got your threads coming across here, and then naturally you got, this right here going on. Occasionally, let's say that some character did something that boogered this up, and so you can't start it, right? But what you can do, if you're particular with it, be careful, especially if it's a little bolt. You got to get your hand on the wheel, and it'll get rid of your fingerprints and stuff, and take part of your fingernail off. But anyway, you can grind it off so that you get rid of the ugly stuff, and you can make it so that you can start the bolt. Right? That's how that would work. So basically, if you need to grind it off like that on the end, but I'm talking about all the way around. You hold it at an angle and get rid of that damaged thread that's right on the end of the bolt. That's a technique that my dad showed me a long time ago. Most mechanics do that anyway. A hydraulic press is being used to separate a bearing from a shaft. What should be used to cover the bearing during the pressing operation? Anybody know? What'd you put?
Brake drum.
Yeah, if you put a brake drum in there, it kind of creates a shield, and all that. So, hold on here. All right. Let me see here. Let me go in here and get.
This yours?
All right. Now, it's important to do that. The reason I'm going to go so far as to talk about this press, I was pressing something off of a part for a forklift back in the late 70s. We had a big press down there. I was working for an offshore services company where we, looked after cars and trucks and forklifts and all that kind of stuff, pipe loaders. And I was pressing that thing off, and it was really acting like it didn't want to come. And what I didn't realize was there was a little piece of there was a hole that was bored in there, and there was a little steel ball in there that I should have pulled out with a magnet before I was doing this. And there was nothing in the manual about that, and I didn't see it anyway. And when that sheared off that little piece of a steel ball, it went into my shoulder like a bullet, and it's still in there. And so what I'm saying is that if things can shatter, when you're pressing too, so wear face protection and at the very least safety glasses when you're doing that. Well, Labor Day was a year ago. I was beating on something out here in the shop, and there was really what I was beating on had become too brittle from being beat on or whatever. And there was a chip of that thing that came out of there and went into my leg like a bullet. It was about like being shot with a 22. It went almost to the bone in there. And it clipped a bunch of little veins. And I had my safety glasses on. Of course, if I'd been wearing a canvas apron, this thing would have bounced off. But it went through my pants and into my leg. And I was thinking, okay, there's not anything that I see bleeding here, even though that was really painful. So I guess I'll just keep working. And so I hit it another couple of times, and one of the guys says, you maybe should go get that seen about. And down there by my boot on the floor, there was a pool growing. And I lost most of a pint of blood in about 4 minutes. And so, but you got to, whenever you get injured like that, if something happens, if you get injured, what I had to do is go in there and, take my trousers down, and I looked at it. It was coming out of my leg it was a stream that was bigger than this brake line, just pouring out. It wasn't an artery, it was veins, and it was coming out. And so what I did was I got, the oldest student I had was 32 years old at the time, and I got him to bring me some gauze pads. And he brought me some gauze pads, and I got him to bring me some shop rags. And so, because I was trying to compress this thing, and it was coming out between my fingers, it was really coming out hard. And so I says, okay, what I need to do is I need to make a compress for this thing. And the best, what I was getting at is this, what you can do that's the most intelligent is just to stay calm, and don't panic. And he was over here, and when he was trying to open the gauze pads for me, his hands were shaking. He was just terrified. And it looked like you had painted the floor red with blood. I mean, it was just everywhere in there. And so I said, okay, let's get a couple of shop rags. I put a little shop rags on it, and then I wrapped it with masking tape and pulled it really tight, and that stopped it. And then of course, I put my pants back up and tightened my belt, and I walked out there and flagged down the maintenance supervisor, and I says, why don't you take me over to Mizell and let's see what they can do about this leg. Anyway, I spent a couple of days in the hospital, and they said it was going to be okay. And the metal's still in there because he didn't want to go in there and take it out. But what I'm getting at is something like that went into my leg could have just as easily go in your eye or your face or just anywhere. And so, take that safety glasses thing really seriously. And you guys that haven't done your safety orientation yet, go ahead and get into your electude and get that done. It's a really easy thing to go through, isn't it? You made a 96 on it, right? It's real easy. And is it interesting? Yeah, kind of. Well, we saw the burned out shops where the fire started and all this kind of stuff, a lot of stuff. But anyway, okay, so here we go. Air impact wrenches should be used with what? Dry air. You need dry air. You might notice the thing we got behind the shop that's hooked up, our air compressor is hooked up through this thing and looks like a big central unit, and it actually dries the air before it ever comes into the shop. Although I will say that when I worked at the Volkswagen place in 1983, there was all kinds of water that was always blowing out their system all the time, and I didn't like that. And so I put a dryer on the line there in my service bay so that I could get the water out of that line. But anyway, not every shop has got a dryer on their line, and it's as good as the one we got. Technician A says an incandescent trouble light may be used when working around gasoline. Have you ever got splattered water or something, or had water drip on a regular incandescent light bulb and had it pop? Mm-hmm. There was a guy that I knew about that was working in a shop at night by himself, and he saw gasoline start dripping on this light bulb, and he knew what was going to happen, and so he jumped up and ran out of the shop. And about the time he cleared the door, the place exploded, and it tried to suck him back in there, and then he hit the ground running like a cartoon character and went on out of there. I mean, this was a big explosion, that happened because of that. So be careful. Of course, who uses that? And most people don't use a drop light anyway. They have rough service bulbs and all that. But if you do use it, make sure that you don't use it around gas and have gas spraying on it. I mean, that will really set fire to a lot of stuff. And also, remember this, most of the cars nowadays, or a lot of them, probably a huge percentage, I don't know how to put it, have got plastic gas tanks on them. And if you've got something that's hot enough that it can melt that plastic gas tank, and it's, you know, if you got a flame going on, and it, yeah, boom. Down there at the end of my street about 6 weeks ago, this jealous boyfriend went by here and threw some burning something under. That's what it looked like to me when I looked at our surveillance video. Threw something that would burn for a while under this girl's car. Of course, it was in the morning, she was not there in the car, but he threw it under the car, and I saw that little flame burning for a little bit, and then the car exploded. It looked like something out of a movie. And then the next thing you know, it's just a massive roaring flames. You know, of course, I called the cops, and they came in with this fire truck and put it out and all that. It didn't take about 10 minutes to get there. That was really something. I got pictures of that too. And I sent pictures to the paper, and they put it in the paper. But anyway, so what's the best location to measure or service the engine block? Oh, incidentally, 6 is supposed to be B if you hadn't put B on that. If you didn't put B on it, slap yourself. Okay, which is the best location to measure or service the engine block? You want it swinging on a chain. You want it mounted on an engine stand if possible, right? If you have an engine stand that'll hold it and all that, but it's best to have an engine stand if you're going to be doing it. To check a crankshaft journal for taper, the journal should be measured at how many locations? Now the journal is the shanty part where the bearings ride, right? That's what that's talking about, like on that crankshaft, you see that right there. How many different places would you get?
6.
Huh?
6.
6 is wrong. 3 is right. Okay. No. All right. A telescopic gauge can be used to measure a cylinder bore. If what other measuring device is used to measure the telescopic gauge? A micrometer. Like for, you know, you can use like I've shown you, you guys had a worksheet last week on that where we use a telescopic gauge. You use a telescopic gauge to measure a micrometer to measure the telescopic gauge after it telescopes out, and you make it a little longer and you drag it through so that it goes to the shortest place, and then whenever you measure it, you got it. But you have to know how to read a mic to do it. Now there are, if you want to be dumbed down and not know how to read a regular mic, there are digital mics that will actually give you the reading in black numbers. You know what I mean? You can buy those, you know, if you decide you. And they also make, at Harbor Freight Salvage for $10, you can buy a vernier caliper that will give you the reading in little black numbers. You know what I mean? So they don't cost very much to get set up to do that. Incidentally, there is somewhere up here, I've got a dial indicator that's digital and gives its reading in the little black numbers. And this thing, whenever you're measuring lateral runout or something, is absolutely useless. You know, basically it is, because all it does, imagine yourself now, if you're just going to be measuring something like backlash in a rear end, don't, that's okay. But if you're turning through you know, like I showed some of you guys how you turn this thing through and measure the lateral runout on a hub, if you see these little black numbers changing up and down, that's useless. You can't do it. I mean, this was here when I came here. I don't know. I mean, but I'm sure, you know, there's ways you can use it, but there's a lot of stuff you can't use that for. Let's see, which metric unit of measure is used for volume measurement? cc, cubic centimeter. Okay, what is a cubic centimeter of water weigh? The weight.
Cubic inch less than 1.
A cubic centimeter of water weighs how much? 1 gram? Have you ever heard of 1 gram? 1 gram is how much a cubic centimeter of water weighs. Okay, how much water is 1,000 cubic centimeters of water? How much water would that be in by volume? You guys are going to know stuff that most people don't know when you leave here if you listen to me. That's 1 liter. 1,000 cubic centimeters is 1 liter, right? Now, if you think about engine sizes, let me ask you this. How many liters is a 5.0 Mustang engine, you know, 5.0 Mustang engine? How many liters is that? 5 liters, all right? So how many cubic inches is that? 302, okay? How many cubic centimeters? 5,000, okay? So if you got I mean, I learned that back whenever people used to do motorcycle stuff, like 125 cc's, that was your displacement. And the displacement of an engine, anybody know what that is? I mean, what that means when you talk about engine displacement? If you capture the air that's being pulled into the engine and pumped through it when you turn the crankshaft 2 times on a 4-cycle engine, you'll get, if it's a 3-liter engine, you'll get 3 liters of air. All right. So always remember, this is something that you can remember, you can take it with you and you can remember it. An ounce of water weighs an ounce. So water, in the metric system and in English, water is where weight and volume come together. So how much, 16 ounces of water is how much? A pint? 16 ounces of weight is what? A pound, that's right. How many gallons, I mean, how many pints are there in a gallon? You guys know that? How many pints in a gallon? 8. How much does a gallon of water weigh? I gave you all the information you needed already.
8 pounds?
If a pint, yeah, exactly. If a pint weighs a pound and there's 8 pints in a gallon, now this is important stuff that you need to know. Okay, let me ask you this. If I've got a tank, a glass tank, that is 12 inches by 12 inches by 12 inches, how many gallons of water will it hold? A cubic foot of space will hold how many gallons of water? How many would you think? Just guess at it.
12.
2
I
gallons.
think it is.
Huh?
2 gallons.
Now we're talking about a space this big.
Oh, gallon.
Cubic, huh?
Gallon.
8 gallons.
8 gallons.
8 gallons. So how much does a cubic foot of water weigh?
8 pounds.
No.
Right.
It's 8 pounds per gallon. 8 times 8 is
64 pounds.
8 times 8 is 64.
Okay, yeah.
So you 64 pounds is how much? Now gasoline weighs less than water, and you know different liquids like weigh at different amounts. But anytime you measure specific gravity of anything, you're comparing the weight of that to the weight of water. See what I mean? So water is the standard. We need to. I mean, everybody knows there's a standard you can use is water for weight and volume. So weight and volume come together on that. And a gram, incidentally, is about what a regular sized paper clip weighs. You got me? Okay. Are you guys bored with this or what? This is stuff you need to commit to memory, you know. And you'd be surprised. Go to school, ask your friends the questions I'm asking you. You know what I mean? About how much does a cubic centimeter of water weigh? You know what your friends will say? Because you're not a teacher like me, what they'll say, who cares? You know what I mean? But the thing about it is, if you're going to be one of the people that's smarter than everybody else, you need to know stuff they don't know. All right, let's go on down here. And a dial indicator can be used to measure what? Crankshaft end play, that's right. Which of these objects have a mass? Now, crankshaft end play is important because there's a bearing in there. So whenever you mash the clutch, you're pushing forward on the crankshaft. When you apply the throttle and the torque converter swells up because of the pressure that's put inside of it, that pushes on the crankshaft. So you need to know, you know, the crankshaft has got thrust bearings on the inside to keep it from going forward and back. And if the thrust bearings are worn out, you can tell that with a dial indicator without even tearing it down. Okay, so which of these objects has a mass of approximately 1 gram? Small paper clip, I just said that. On a push rod engine, camshaft journal diameter often does what toward the rear of the engine? Decreases. Now, this is it. The camshaft bearings, see that camshaft laying there? The camshaft, no, that's a crankshaft. Yeah, that other one. That camshaft, these journals here, and you'd be surprised how often this is true. Let's say you buy, these bearings look like a little, you know those little rings you put napkins in when you're laying them on a fancy, they look like that. Well, the British call them serviette rings. But anyway, these right here are basically going to be, the bearings will get smaller and smaller as they go toward the back. And if you were to measure this one, you would probably find, see that one's a little smaller than that one. I can tell that by looking at it. See that? And so what you do is when you're going there putting them in with a tool, you got to make sure you're putting them in the right order, because you can't just grab one of the bearings and put it somewhere. You got me? You got to put it in the right spot. And a lot of your bearings, like Perfect Circle, numerically Their number there is sequentially so that you can tell which one goes where. In the old Jeeps, they would actually have them color coded. They'd have a little piece of paper saying this one, the one that with the yellow paint goes in the back, and the one with the green paint goes the second. See what I'm saying? So there's a lot more to this engine stuff than what you might think there'd be. You don't just grab a bearing and slam it in there, you know, on the camshaft anyway. All right, so there we go. Let me see. Where are we at? What number? 14, the best tool to measure clearance between two components is what?
Feeler gauge.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea. Feeler gauge is good, it is our friend. Wiring diagrams are usually found where? Factory service manual. Unit repairing manuals tell you how to rebuild an engine or a transmission. Owner's manual tells you how you're supposed to, you know, the mileage intervals for maintaining and then where your fuses are and all. But I mean, you're not going to find wiring diagrams in a lubrication guide either. So, exploded views of components may be found where? Then exploded views, yeah, the service manuals. Here, give Brittany a gold star. All right, so.
Where did you say it could be?
That's going to be the service manual, yeah. You mark them wrong if they're wrong now. Technician A says electronic service manual information may be expensive to access. I pay $1,000 a year for all that. Identifix costs about $150 a month. You know, so you're basically looking at some pretty heavy money. Let me see here. Where are we at here? The second one here says, Technician B says electronic service information systems can save time because they can be searched quickly, and both technicians are correct on that. Identifix is a really good thing too because it'll tell you, it's like having 1,000 mechanics in the room and they all raise, when a bunch of them raise their hand when you say, have you ever seen this before? You know, it's always handy if you're working on a car, if you ask somebody if they've seen it before. The reason I knew how to fix your backfire was I'd seen it before. You know, if you're having to figure it out from scratch and you don't understand basic principles, you'll scratch your head and not understand how to fix this and all that.
Stuck on that for about 2 years.
Yeah, and he'd rev the vehicle, I mean, his pickup up and it'd let off and it'd go boom like a shotgun. And so,
Yeah.
but see, the thing about it is this air management valve was letting that fresh oxygen go in there. When you let off the gas, the gas that's sweating on the inside of the manifold turns to vapor and goes into the exhaust, but there's not enough oxygen for it to light off until it gets in there. And this pipe, this air pipe that's going for the air injection reactor, was all of that was disconnected, but it was still able to, the natural low pulses of the exhaust was pulling air in there. It went in there and all that old hot vaporized gasoline in the exhaust, it would just light off, you know, like you were have this thing was sounding terrible. I had a Volkswagen Carmen Ghia I used to drive one time that had megaphone tailpipes on it, and I could drive down the road and switch it off and they go boom, turn it back on, and it looked like two shotguns, boom, out the back, you know. All that shot was fire out, but it scared the daylights out of a car that was following you. They'd think you was being shot at like James Bond or something. All right, let me see here. Let me go here. Technician A says electronic service, never mind. What's a free internet site that contains case studies of problems and successful repairs? That's actually IATN. However, IATN is what they do to winnow out the people that are just wanting freebies without helping anybody. They monitor how much help you give other people. Also, when you go in there, you got to check boxes on what your area of expertise is. So and if you just check all the boxes, you'll open your email tomorrow morning and have 486 emails, and they come in just screaming in there like nobody's business. So, but anyway, I'm hooked up on there, and I try to help people every now and then. But I mean, that doesn't cost anything. However, if you want to get waveforms and other pertinent information that goes a little beyond case studies, you got to pay a little bit of money every month. Not very much. The number of the day of the year is known as what? The Julian date. That's the Julian date. You knew that, didn't you? You knew that was the Julian date, didn't you? You didn't know it was the Julian date. Okay, all right. Which section of the service manual includes onboard diagnostic information? Engine performance. It has to be. All right. Pretty good.